Good morning to the Honorable Minister of Agriculture for Honduras, Mr. Jacobo Paz, whom I had the pleasure of having lunch with yesterday. Very interesting conversation. Good morning to representative from the Ministry of Agriculture of Ecuador, Madam Maria Victoria. Good morning to the representative from the Ministry of Environment of Ecuador, Madam Carol Shahab. Representatives from WWF, a member of the RSPO board, Mr. Jose Roberto Montenegro, and all honored guests. It's a pleasure to be in Quito. It's my second time, and I still haven't learned Spanish. I apologize. I know today, for me, this is a very important event, but I also know there's another important event that is competing for space in your consciousness today. I know many of you are thinking about the match at 4 p.m. today between Ecuador and Colombia. I cannot promise that my presentation will be as exciting as a football match, but it will last, I promise you, less than 90 minutes. So, we'll go to the presentation. The RSPO embarked on something called a jurisdictional certification pilot. And we did so because we were a bit worried about the speed at which transformation happens in the industry, the speed at which our impacts can be realized on the ground. So we thought we should try something new, and we thought of something called jurisdictional certification. This all started, the conversation about it started about close to 3 years ago. And we've developed some kind of guidance around it, but not formal yet. We're still learning as we are moving forward. The key elements to jurisdictional certification, as you see here, is we must have government commitment from that jurisdiction. We must have clear boundary lines of where this jurisdiction lies. We must ensure that it is a truly multi-stakeholder process. We must facilitate cooperation or true partnership between all stakeholders. And we should utilize or optimize all the resources we have within the jurisdiction to make this happen. So these are the key elements that got us to start thinking, and we invited interested parties to come forward and let us know if they're interested in something called a pilot project for jurisdictional certification. Now, why did we do this? I think one of the key problems we have is trying to get the smallholders or smaller growers on board. The big players is not so much of a problem. It's the small players. And the small players tend to have some very systemic problems. The first and most important systemic problem would be legality, which is why we thought that we cannot address such an issue through the normal means of certification. We need to involve government and other stakeholders to solve the issue of legality. The second systemic issue we have with smallholders and small growers is having them understand and implement difficult concepts like what you see there, high conservation value, high carbon stock, social environmental impact assessment, free, prior and informed consent, all very complicated, and I'm not so sure that even the experts today can really agree on these terminology themselves. So we need to solve this in a very systematic way in a jurisdiction. We also know that smallholders and small growers, we have the issue of knowledge on how to get access to best agricultural practice, how to get access to best planting materials, best training, etc., etc. And these are very important elements in going towards sustainability that the RSPO cannot possibly do on its own. There are millions of smallholders, 4 million at least in Southeast Asia, and I don't know how many you have in Latin America. So there's a lot, and the RSPO cannot possibly reach it one management unit at a time. We need to upscale. We also need to ensure that data and information reach the smallholders and small growers in an efficient manner. And certainly RSPO is not good at this because we don't have the reach. And so on. So, and the last point is particularly important, and which is what I see one of the big benefits I've seen so far in our work in the jurisdictional certifications. Getting stakeholders that we don't normally engage to come on board and lend a hand. In particular, research institutions and academia. We have had very good responses from our pilot sites, and I'll talk about our pilot sites later. And here's another important aspect. One of the big things, impacts that RSPO hopes to achieve is setting aside and protecting very important conservation areas. Now the RSPO as of today collectively set aside 157,000 hectares. And last year we increased this protected area by 9%. And we will continue to increase this protection every year. But 157,000 hectares in the grand scheme of things is not very much, considering the rapid loss of forests we have today. We need to think of a better way. And we also found that despite setting aside these conservation areas, these are islands. Oh, can you go back? Go back, yeah, so go back to the, forward one step. No. Forward. Yeah, okay, so we've set aside these islands based on management units. In each management unit, in each land holding, there's some important forests and it was set aside. So you can see these are islands. It's very nice to have these conservation islands, but in a landscape, it might not mean anything. So that is why we're trying to look at the whole landscape. And if you click forward, that is why we hope by looking at a landscape level, by looking at a jurisdiction level, we can have much more impact in setting aside areas. We will know at a landscape level where the corridors we need to set aside, linking up to a larger landscape of forest, for example. And that is one of the hopes of jurisdictional certification. So, many might not know, some of you might not know the impacts of RSPO. We are becoming a huge organization. We have 3,200 and something members from 87 countries. We certify, as Dave mentioned, 20% or 21% of global production. We have it's now 127,000 smallholders certified. Our oil yield per hectare, certified oil yield per hectare is 5 tons of oil per hectare. Great impacts. But on the flip side, we haven't certified 80% of world palm oil. We have not certified 4 million smallholders. We have not stopped deforestation. And so on and so forth. So whilst we're doing great impacts, we really need to step up. And the jurisdictional certification is probably one of the likeliest ways we can do so. Next. So, we have now 3 jurisdictions who we consider as pilot projects. And each of the 3, we ask 9 questions. At the end of this pilot project, we hope that these 9 questions can be answered. So the first question, we ask the jurisdiction, will it be guided by multiple stakeholders? Where we talk about true partnerships among stakeholders. How will you remove deforestation from your jurisdiction? How will you make good from the deforestation losses post-2005? And I want to stop here and explain. So in the RSPO, there's a cutoff date of 2005, where we say beyond 2005, you should not remove primary forests, protected areas, or high conservation value areas. If you have removed, you cannot get certified. But we have now developed a compensation mechanism that allows you to get certified, provided you make good the compensation. So this is a question we pose to the jurisdictions. How will you make good what has been deforested post-2005? How will you remove conflict palm oil? This is a tough one. A lot of it's now becoming more and more top on the agenda on sustainability, conflict within supply chains. When we talk about conflict, we mean perhaps stakeholders that have been forcibly removed from their lands so that another person can occupy to plant oil power. When we talk about conflict, we talk maybe about communities being given a raw deal, or a terrible deal when it comes to the developer buying their lands. When we talk about conflict, we mean communities that had rights to use the land in the past, but the rights were extinguished because a bigger player using political connections have taken charge of those lands. These are examples of conflicts, and this is something that we hope to address in a systematic way in jurisdictions. Now after doing all that, how can we monitor these things? That's the question we pose to jurisdictions. So as mentioned by the previous presenter, my friend Dave, he talks about WRI and Global Forest Watch, which is indeed one of the tools we encourage the jurisdictions to use. It's a freely accessible tool. As far as I know, it's freely available to anyone who wants to partner with them. And indeed, RSPO were one of the catalysts for them starting Global Forest Watch in the beginning. So we use it, RSPO uses it, RSPO members have their concessions on the Global Forest Watch. Now we would like jurisdictions to have data available on Global Forest Watch to monitor issues like deforestation, conflict, etc., etc. We then ask the jurisdiction, who in the jurisdiction will manage all of this? Who will be the manager to maintain the certification in his jurisdiction? The seventh question you will see is for RSPO. How will RSPO verify this? And this is not for the jurisdiction to answer, this is for RSPO to answer. And the 8 and 9 questions is a really long-term questions, and really with lots of resources required. How will farms comply with good agricultural practices? And how will farms comply with proper treatment of workers? Which is also coming up to be a huge issue in global supply chain discussions. So I think these are the 9 questions that we ask the jurisdictions, and hopefully at the end of the process, these 9 questions will be suitably answered on the Bornean island of Malaysia. Now, if you notice, these are sub-national initiatives, meaning at a state level or provincial level. Ecuador will be the first at a national level, I hope. So you have something to be proud of. In all of these jurisdictions, there's of course challenges, without doubt. And the challenges come from mindset change, I find. So in the last 1.5 years, we're discussing with the stakeholders there. The RSPO plays an advisory role. We want the stakeholders in that jurisdiction to totally own the process. So RSPO plays an advisory role, but the owners of the process is the jurisdiction. We find that a lot of times these methods, this terminology, these ideas are very new to stakeholders. And when faced with something new, the first thing you say is, it's impossible. And I always tell people, and I will say this to you, you will hear me say it time and time again. The only way to overcome the impossible is through collaboration and through partnerships. The only way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, I tell people. You cannot solve and swallow that elephant straight away. And it will take time. You need to know which part of the elephant to bite first. But collaboratively, I think you'll be able to do it. This is the biggest challenge for us. It's about the mindset issues at the jurisdictions. What we also have been doing to encourage the jurisdictions, we have tried to cross-fertilize ideas across jurisdictions. So now, Kalimantan, the most progressive so far happens to be Sabah. They are moving quite rapidly along the process of this jurisdictional pilot. Central Kalimantan is second, and South Sumatra, I would say, a very distant third. But Central Kalimantan have been sending people to Sabah to understand the process. And one of the big things Central Kalimantan wants to understand is how on earth can you share decision-making with civil society? That's what the government wants to understand. And the business and industry also wants to ask, how can you share, be true partners on this thing with business and industry